compañera, viva la revolución. Vuela, vuela palomita, multiplica mi canción. Adelante compañera, viva la revolución.
Vuela, vuela palomita, pajarita de la paz.
Vuela, vuela palomita, multiplica mi canción.
Adelante, adelante, adelante compañera, solamente con tu bandera.
Vuela, vuela palomita, multiplica mi canción. Adelante compañera, viva la revolución.
Welcome to Witness Nicaragua. Every day on the news we hear different stories about Nicaragua. Some people are saying that we should support the Contras. Some people are saying that we should not, that it's wrong. And it's very hard to make up a decision if you don't have enough information. I don't know how you make decisions on complex issues, but what I usually do is I go and talk to people that I trust. But in fact, for a long time, I didn't know anybody I could talk to about Nicaragua because it was so far away and who knew what was going on. And then I was lucky enough that a friend of mine knew someone who went to Nicaragua and came back and showed slides at our house. And he's going to be on the show later today. You'll meet him. But having met Mark and talked about Nicaragua and hearing his story so different from what I was seeing on television, on the radio, and reading in the newspapers, it made me very curious because I did trust him. So that got me started looking for people who'd been to Nicaragua. On the show today, we have 11 people who went to Nicaragua, and they're going to say why they went, what they saw, and what they think the truth is. And you're the judge. I'd like to introduce to you, first of all, Christy Jonas, who's 14 years old, Joanne Sunshower, who is a carpenter and works for Cambridge Building, is it?
Yes,
Cambridge
Builders.
Cambridge Builders. And Ann Philbin, who is a teacher and works for
Roxbury Youth Works.
Roxbury Youth Works. All three of these women have been to Nicaragua, and we're going to talk with them now about why they went and what they saw. First of all, Ann, I came across you because you were giving a slideshow presentation that was advertised in Somerville, and that was about Vecino. Can you tell everyone what Vecino is?
Sure. Vecino stands for the Spanish word neighbor, and it is a group of, well, it was a group of about 38 North Americans who went down to Nicaragua in the summer of 1985 to build a health clinic there in Esteli, in the northern section, which is the region in which a lot of the war is happening. We left on June 1st and spent 2.5 months there. And we went down in waves of either 2 weeks, a month, or 2 months. People went for different lengths of time. The project started as a result of a woman named Natalie Zimmerman, who was down in Nicaragua at the language school, the Nica school, which other people that will speak today attended. And she was living with a family in Esteli. And the woman that headed up that family was very active in the barrio, or the community where she was living, and expressed that they had a need for a health clinic and could she possibly help doing some fundraising back here in this country. And when she came back here to try to start that effort, she was hooked up with a man named Steve Norris, who is a builder, carpenter in Roxbury. And from there, it started. And that the project grew from there until it attracted about 40 people.
Well, you've brought some of your slides for us to have a look at.
Right.
How about we start off with
Sure.
that, and you can explain exactly what was going on.
Okay,
here.
great. This is a picture that's showing you a map of the Central American region and the countries. Nicaragua is the country, the black country, bordered by Honduras on the north and Costa Rica on the south. Most of the war activity is happening right along the borders, especially with Honduras. This is a closer map looking at Nicaragua, and Esteli is in the northeastern corner there. And that's the region that we were working in. We were actually working in the city of Esteli. The health clinic that we were serving was being built in a barrio called El Calvario, and it was servicing 6 barrios. This is a shot of some of the brigade members, and if they look kind of bedraggled, it's because we've just been lifting bags of cement, very heavy bags, for about an hour and a half. But this is a group shot. The group that we went down with was very diverse, ranging in ages from about 3 to 58. This is a shot of people delivering sand to the site, and it's just a slide to show that there was a great deal of community support for our effort, and every time we ran out of supplies, which was frequent, someone seemed to show up and deliver just what we needed. So it was a very community-supported effort, and here some bricks are being delivered to the site. It was really the Nicaraguans' project. It started out of their campaign to raise money to build this health center, and we were just helping to facilitate that effort with labor and materials. And as I said, lumber cooperatives and a lot of other people supported us. This is a street scene. All of us actually, lived with families, which was a tremendous part of our experience. And this just gives you a sense for the kind of homes we would have lived in and what the area looked like. This is a shot from the actual work on the site. This woman is the nurse that was with us. There was a lot of labor like this that we wouldn't see here in the United States, a lot of bending of what's called rebar, which forms the core of the cement columns in the building. This man's name is Ramon. He was one of the 2 Nicaraguans that we hired to help us out. As I said, it was a really community-supported effort, and we needed the assistance and guidance of Nicaraguans to help us in the construction efforts. So it was real important to have their direction and expertise. This is just a working shot showing 2 of the members of the brigade lifting cement. The project, as I said, started just about the first week of June, and we had to rush to complete it in the time that we had, but we were really lucky in that we were able to complete the project. This is a shot showing one of the Nicaraguans helping us. The amount of labor that was given us on the part of the Nicaraguans was incredible. There was 1 day a week on Sundays, which they call Rojo y Negro Day, in which volunteer support was given us, and sometimes a whole shoemaking cooperative would show up, or women like this, who were the mothers and the families we were living with, would show up and help on the site. There were a lot of children that wanted to help us out, and they would come over in an organized way and do that as their contribution to the project. So we had more than enough assistance. This shot is just to give kind of a symbol of the background of war, which was a really present thing for us as members of that community as well. In a lot of different ways that was manifested to us. There were counterattacks happening while we were there, and there were deaths. This is, again, a funeral that took place while we were there. And it became a much more common thing. As the aid was passed here in this country while we were there, the Contras seemed to be emboldened by that and step up their efforts. And there's a direct impact that is felt in the communities in terms of lives as soon as that happens. This is a shot of a trench that's being dug for a tank to be placed in, and again gives you a sense for the state of preparedness that they have to be in. They don't take the threat of war very lightly. They have to constantly be ready in case something happens. But this is again a sign of the unity in their struggle and their celebration of that unity and their dedication to just always move forward despite the difficulties that they face economically because of the war and also in terms of lives. It's a very dedicated effort. This is a shot early on in the project, and the next one is probably a later shot. This is, again, give you a sense for the plot that we started with, because we really did build from the ground up. And this is the last shot of the clinic. It ended up being 2 buildings, and it'll give you a sense for what it looked like when we were finished. And right now, it's even more finished. There's been some grounds work done, as painting on the inside, as you see here, furniture added in, so that it's in a functioning state. And actually, it is functioning now. There are mental health workers on there in the clinic doing work, and there's a Nicaraguan doctor there. And we also have sent down 2 North Americans. This is the shot from the celebration for the dedication of the clinic, at which Comandante Leticia Herrera came. She was the national coordinator of the CDS, which is the Barrio committee that supported us. And this is a banner which we used kind of as a symbol of our efforts in unity with the Nicaraguans. It means health of the people, salud del pueblo. And it's kind of a symbol of the struggle to work together to help in improving the Nicaraguan society and building for a new society there. It's a shot of 2 children. As I said, there's a lot of children there, and very excited about being near us and helping us out and wanting to participate in the spirit of the project. Again, a shot just to give you a feel for the people of Nicaragua and the environment that they live in. One of the things that we felt most strongly about was that the combined effort, people to people, was a really empowering one for both sides. And that if we could just work that way internationally all the time, wonderful things would result. A shot of the kids on site helping out. This is a shot of a dentist that came down with us, and he injured his back, but he had brought his supplies with him, and right away his attention was required. Mothers brought their children to him, and he did some dental work on people that are there. These are shots from the hospital in Esteli to give you a sense for the real, kind of substandard quality of the hospital's facilities in comparison to those in the United States. There's only one hospital in that community.
Well, thanks a lot for showing us those slides.
Sure.
I know that you had many, many more, and it was hard to pick the ones to show tonight. But I'd like to ask you, why did you go to Nicaragua?
Why did I go? I guess there's a lot of reasons. I had actually learned a lot about Nicaragua and knew what was happening there. I wanted to go down to try to participate in that struggle in some way, but also to go down and get some firsthand experience, because in speaking to people here, it's much more effective in communicating a message if people give you the credibility of having gone down to find out for yourself what it's like and what's happening there. So,
And what did you find out when you were there?
I found out lots of things. Mostly reaffirming what I had learned here. I had been organizing on Central American issues, and so pretty much understood the nature of the conflict. But I think I learned much more firsthand about what the people of Nicaragua are like and the struggle that they're engaged in, and the fact that the Contras, at least in the way in which we experienced them there especially, are only designed to destroy what the Nicaraguans are trying to create there. What we saw was simply just attacks on health centers and cooperatives and electrical centers and civilians, and trying to target leadership people in the government to try to cause chaos there. So it was a very destructive way in which we saw the Contras work, and that kind of counterpointed by the people of Nicaragua, who were struggling to kind of build on the new pride that they had gained in really feeling a part of what was happening in their country for the first time, and trying to move towards positive ends in education and health and organizing and in terms of land reform and a lot of other directions.
Now, is the Vecino project, which you went down to build the health clinic, is that still continuing?
It is. It's in a different form right now. What we're focusing on is continuing support for the clinic that we built. We made an agreement with MINSA, which is the Ministry of Health in Region 1, and with the local people and the national government, that we would cooperate in trying to supply and equip the clinic to get it started, and also to send down 4 North American medical people, a pediatrician, a triage nurse, a dentist, and a lab technician, who are people that are not always available in Nicaragua in a clinic setting. And we actually have, for the first time, finally filled all 4 of those spots, and by the first week in October, all 4 of those people will be there. North Americans.
You were telling me a rather amazing figure of the amount of money your small group of people had raised to support this clinic.
Right. God, I'm not sure what the total figure even is now.
I think it's about $100,000.
It's close to $100,000.
$100,000.
We had no idea we were going to raise that much money. But prior to our leaving, we did fundraising and education in the form of house parties, simply having people go out and show slides and talk about what we were trying to do and where we were trying to go. And people were very pulled into that effort and just gave a lot to support us in materials and money. And it really helped us a lot. And people continue to do that.
So if someone wanted to support your project, they could get in touch with Vecino
Very definitely.
and talk to you about it, and maybe you
Yes.
could show your slides.
Sure.
And maybe people could give contributions if they wanted to help in that way.
Very definitely. And they could contact Mary Lenahan, and her number is, let's see now if I can remember it by heart, 524-0668. She lives in Jamaica Plain. So they could contact her.
Okay. Joanne, I'd like to, when I first met you, it was also at the slideshow for Vecino, which I know you've been involved in, but you know a lot more about other things that are happening in the United States than anyone I've ever met. And I wonder if you could just talk about the Sister City projects and other ways that Americans are connecting with people in Nicaragua.
Certainly, Martha. I'd be really happy to. I've been going back and forth to Nicaragua for about 4 years now. I originally went down to help start the Nica School, which is located in Esteli. And last year I got involved in helping to organize the Vecino project, as well as something called Fresh View Tour, which was a project in which we took teachers and high school students from 5 different states. And we had 2 weeks in Nicaragua, and we traveled around and met with teachers and high school students in Nicaragua.
Fantastic.
Yes, that was really a lot of fun. Actually, I think the high school tour was my favorite, because the kids getting together with the teenagers in Nicaragua were so enthusiastic, and you know, those young people don't have the barriers, I mean both North Americans and Nicaraguan, that sometimes adults have initially when they meet with each other.
Well, you also brought some slides. How about we have a look at your slides and then we come back to talking about the Sister City Project and other things like that that we were discussing before the show.
Certainly. Well, I'm glad you started out with this slide because these are two Mosquito Indians on my trip to Bluefields in the Atlantic coast with a group of teachers to visit the teachers. We met these two people and they were our guides. This is the people at a cooperative in north of Esteli where they just got the title to their land and they're inviting more refugees from the Contra areas to be there. This is a shot of the Feast of the Holy Cross being celebrated in León. Religion is very important to the people there, and the majority of the population is Catholic. In fact, the North American that you see on the right is George Baldwin, who was Dean of Students at St. Paul Methodist Seminary in Kansas City, Missouri, and he chose to spend 2 years now down there going around and helping in different projects and working with the poor. This shows the destruction of a health clinic in Miraflor, which is east of Esteli. While we were there, the Contra attacked and destroyed this health clinic, along with the medical records of young children. And this is a Red Cross helping a mother and a child away from the area. This also shows the destruction of an electrical facility just north of Esteli, and is another example of the Contra attacks. They don't engage with the Sandinista army. All they do is attack facilities that bring things to people and ambush civilians. These people belong to the National Theater Troupe, and they're young people in their teens and 20s that travel around different areas of Nicaragua, including the war zones, performing for people who are working in those areas. This is the gallery in Esteli of all the teenagers who have lost their lives since 1976 first to Somoza's guards and then to the Contra attacks up until this very day. And this is a funeral, one of the funerals that we attended, of one of the teenagers who had died in battle with the Contra in Esteli. And this is a shot from the July 19th celebration in 1985. You can see how young Nicaragua is. Everywhere you look, you see young people. And it's young people who know that their brothers and sisters have given their lives before them, and yet they're willing to work and give everything to their country also. And it's a funny sort of patriotism. It's not what you would think of as, you're just thinking of your country as an abstract thing. Nicaraguan after Nicaraguan will tell you, I would much rather be being a farmer or an architect or a student than being a soldier, but I have to defend my home and my family and the future of my children.
Well, why did you go to Nicaragua?
Well, I got very excited about Nicaragua when I was attending the Weston School of Theology during 1978 and 9. And I made up my mind then that because of the participation of Roman Catholics, actually in Nicaragua, in the process of the revolution, that had to be one of the places where people were really living out their visions of creating the kind of society on this earth where people would really participate with each other and have a say in what they were doing and have a way to make things better. So I worked for 2 years setting up a foundation for Central American refugees here in Boston, Centro Presente. And then when I met Beverly Truman, who had the idea for the NICA school, I found my opportunity to actually go down to Central America, and that was very exciting. And I wanted to go to Nicaragua because I suspected that the people in Nicaragua were actually doing some of the things that most of us dream about. And when I got there, I found that it was all true. That,
for example, what kind of things?
Well, they were improving health care. They had taught people to read. They had brought down the infant mortality. 3 times as many people are in schools now than used to be. And another exciting thing to me, and this has only grown in the 4 years that I've been traveling to Nicaragua, is the amount of North American people. I think there are 800 North Americans now who are working and living full-time in Nicaragua.
Some of them are teachers in the universities. There are medical personnel. There are teachers who work with adult education in the high school projects. There are farmers. There are agronomists. There are journalists. There are lawyers. There are people in research, in economic and social research. There are people really in all phases of life who have gotten so excited by visiting Nicaragua that they find the way to pay for themselves, and they have to subsidize themselves because Nicaragua is too poor to pay them, to go and live there for 1 or more years in order to contribute to this exciting project. And if I may say so, North Americans are not the only ones who are excited about Nicaragua. You can go to Nicaragua and find people from many European and Latin American countries who have share the same excitement and are working. I could also say something about the sister city projects that we were talking about earlier. People who aren't able to spend as much time as a year or more to go down there have the possibility of joining a harvest brigade, a reforestation brigade, a construction brigade. There are sister cities between Burlington, Vermont, for example, and Puerto Cabezas on the Atlantic coast, between Seattle, Washington, and Managua, between Washington, D.C. and Bluefields, between cities in New Jersey, cities in Kansas, cities in Wisconsin, and small towns or larger towns in Nicaragua.
And what does a sister city do? What does that mean?
Well, there's actually a department for official sister city relationships in Washington, D.C., and every city in the United States has the possibility of becoming a sister city with whatever country in the world. And the way that gets started is that someone in the community goes and talks to different groups in whatever city you're living in, for example, Somerville, and finds out if people would be excited about having a relationship with this particular country. Now, once that relationship is set up, that opens up the possibility for daycare centers corresponding with other daycare centers, for people in high schools corresponding with people in high schools in the other city, hospitals to hospitals, sharing artists, sending artists and musicians back and forth, and generally just getting to know each other and becoming better neighbors in the world.
Would you say if somebody wanted to go to Nicaragua that it would be easy to get there? How would a person go about getting there without joining a brigade or going for a year? Are there other ways that you can go?
Oh, you can go. Nicaragua welcomes all foreign citizens, but especially people from the United States, because they feel that they are misunderstood, and they invite people to come down and visit Nicaragua to see for themselves. And all you have to do is spend about $650 for a round-trip ticket, have a visa that won't expire for at least 6 months, and bring down, I don't know what the minimum amount of money is, something like $100 or $200, just so they know that you're not going to go broke while you're there. And that's it. You don't even have to get a visa or anything. They will give you a visa right there where you're entering the country.
Well, that sounds exciting. Christy, you brought some slides too of things that you saw when you were there, and I'm real excited to see what you'd like to present to us.
Okay. That's me and a friend of mine who was working on the brigade with us. We're bending rebars, the things that Anne was talking about earlier. As you can see, we're having a lot of fun. This is kind of an interesting shot. This is me and I guess she was what was she?
A Sandinista.
Sandinista soldier who was on the boat to Bluefields with me, and the guy behind us was the U.S. attaché, military attaché to the embassy in Managua. This is a group of the Juventud, the youth organization in Bluefields, and this is a marching band. I'm not quite sure what they're from. I think they're from a high school.
Was that some kind of parade that was going on?
Yeah. This is this is a display of the science exhibits that they had in Esteli. All the students could participate in this, and they set up their science exhibits. This is a group of teenagers who was in Esteli. As you can see, most of them are outfitted for fighting and have guns. A lot of the teenagers patrolled around where we were working when counterattacks seemed like they might happen. This is one of the girls who we lived with. She's probably doing her laundry right now. This is the kitchen where we stayed, and 3 of the kids who were in our family. This is the beach. It's my favorite part. They have beautiful beaches, and it's always warm, and they have wonderful seafood.
And how did you come to go to Nicaragua?
Well, basically, my mom convinced me to go. She had been going for about 3 years before that, and I wanted to see what it was like, what she was doing. I basically had no idea what it was like, and she convinced me to go, so I went.
What did it seem like when you got there?
It was really different because it's a third world country, and they work more than we do, just because they have to, because they're working to build their society up from the ground, and it's basically just poorer. That was the thing that struck me most. Is there's no paved streets, and people walk around. They have like 1 pair of shoes, if any. The food's very simple. It's rice and beans and sometimes some meat.
And you were working on the construction of the clinic, is that right?
Yeah.
Well, how did you know how to build a clinic?
I didn't. We had a couple people, most of us didn't know how to build a clinic. We had a couple people with us who were professional carpenters, and they basically just guided us and told us what to do until we got good at bending things and laying bricks and pouring cement and carrying bags, stuff like that.
So you came back knowing a lot more than when you
Yeah,
went.
definitely.
Do you
Can lay
think,
bricks.
would you recommend to other people your age to go to Nicaragua?
Oh yeah, it's a great experience. It's much more of a sense of community down there because everyone is working for basically the same thing, and they have to stay together to work for it.
And what would you say they're working for?
Oh, peace, to build their society up to a point where other people, I think they resent, the involvement that bigger countries, try to pressure them into doing other things, and they just want to have their own society, their own country, not someone else's.
Did the Nicaraguan teenagers that you talked to know anything about the United States?
No, but they were really, really curious. They all asked me, what I did at home, like what my house looked like, where I went to school and what I did at school, if I worked. All the girls wanted to know if I had a boyfriend, what did he look like. They were very, very curious and knew very little also about us.
That probably makes American teenagers and Nicaraguan teenagers roughly equal
Yeah.
as far as knowing about each other's countries.
Yeah.
Well, we have a few more minutes in this segment of the show, and I'd like to ask you, now's your chance. What would you like to tell people about what it was like in Nicaragua?
Something that just flashed in my mind was to thank you and this station for letting us be here to just present a different kind of voice. Because I think one of the most frustrating things is to come back here and hear what people have to say, which is usually very removed from the reality of Nicaragua, and caught up in a lot of rhetoric, whether it's anti-communism or Soviet Union or whatever people have as their image about Nicaragua. And if they just take the time to take a little bit closer look for themselves, then they see a very, very different picture. And it takes just a closer look or speaking to someone that's been, or if you have the opportunity going, and it just blows all of those stereotypes right out of your mind. It really does. And that's something that I get frustrated about when I'm here, and it's something I wish I had more opportunities to communicate in this kind of a broad way that you're providing us. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad you could come on the show, too. You know what I feel? I feel that I'm lucky in living in an urban center where there are lots of people who've gone to Nicaragua. And what I feel is, and I hope people will see this tape in many other places where maybe in their town no one has gone yet, and allow people to know that there are a lot of people that have gone and they could go too. Mm-hmm. One thing that struck me that people said was that the Nicaraguans repeatedly said, go back and tell Americans what it's like here. Did that happen to you?
That was a constant message. I think the biggest things that Nicaraguans feel that we can do for them is to come back here and speak to our people about what we have seen down there.
The other thing besides wanting us to come back and talk to people about the reality of Nicaraguan society is that their second most high concern is nuclear war. They said, well, thank you for coming here and we're really glad you're interested in us, but what are you doing about nuclear war? And that showed to me a high level of political consciousness on their part and a concern not only for themselves but for the rest of the world.
I'd like to ask you, are there any particular stereotypes that you heard about Nicaragua before you left that got blown away when you got there?
Well, certainly there's a thing about all of them being communists and it being a totalitarian state and nobody being free to do anything. You know, restriction of the press and restriction of freedom of religion and all of that. And I found none of that to be true. That Nicaragua is one of the places where actually I feel the most at home because the people are so friendly. The soldiers are amazing. They feel like Boy Scouts. It's not like they're ineffective. I'm not saying they're ineffective, but they're polite, they're friendly, but they're very firm in doing their job. And the other funny thing about Nicaragua is you can go around the streets and bump into somebody, and if you've ever been there before, there's 3 chances out of 4 that they're going to know somebody that you know. So it really is like one big extended family.
You were telling me, Joanne, about some other projects that people do, like bicycles, sending bicycles and sending backpacks. Could you talk a little bit about that?
There is a project called Bikes Not Bombs, and it was started by someone from Washington, D.C., and from Carl Kurtz, who lives here in the Boston area. And they brought down bicycle repair tools and some bicycles, and they've started giving the tools to several cooperatives in Nicaragua because bicycles, of course, since there's a shortage of gasoline and a shortage of parts for automobiles, is now one of the favorite transportations. So there are these little cooperatives started all over Nicaragua that build and repair bicycles for people, and this is a continuing relationship. That kind of project has been started one-to-one, and this is something that's very exciting to me. There's all these people-to-people projects. There's a fisherman-to-fisherman project started by someone in Alaska. There's a sewing cooperative projects where women send sewing machines to women that was started by someone named Susan Redlick who lived in the Boston area. And there are many, many other people-to-people projects like that have been started. I'd like to tell people about the latest effort that some of us brought back from the Vecino Brigade. And now that Congress has passed the $100 million in aid for the Contra, and the CIA is getting $450 million more, people are very interested, more than ever, I think, to say, what can I do to stop this madness? Because, of course, the percentage of the polls say that people in the United States do not want a war against Nicaragua. And we've started this new campaign. It's called War Relief for Nicaraguans. And it's simply sending money to Nicaragua, to something called the Commission which aids the combatants and their families for war orphans and families of soldiers who are disabled or killed. And this goes to help the people who are most directly suffering as a result of the war. And I can say what the address is here, which is War Relief for Nicaraguans, Post Office Box 2040, Jamaica Plain, 02130.
What we're going to let you have a look at now is a tape that was done in Nairobi, Kenya, last summer at the end of the Non-Governmental Organizations Forum for the end of the Decade of Women. You will hear a woman named Sylvia from Nicaragua speaking about her view of life there. She was one of 9 people from Nicaragua who went to the conference to connect with other women from all around the world. So we'll now have a look at Sylvia.
My name is Sylvia McEwen. I am the president of the Nicaraguan Solidarity Committee with the People.
Are there particular issues that women are particularly concerned with in Nicaragua?
Well, to tell you the truth, we have 2 main concerns now in Nicaragua. One is defense, and the other as women, and the other is production. So that's all. principal issues, and that's what we are struggling and working very hard.
Defense meaning women in the military?
Defense of the revolution in all fields, which is not only military. You have to work very hard. What we're doing here is defense of the revolution. We are defending the revolution here in Nairobi. It's part of our work as women. We have tell everybody what is happening in Nicaragua. We are been telling all women around the world, asking for solidarity. It's part of our work as defense of the revolution, to let everybody know what the real truth, because usually what you get is part lies in misinformation of what is happening in Nicaragua. Our president answered, our government, revolutionary government, answered the embargo with a national campaign that is called Nicaragua Must Survive, and it's around the world. We are asking with the right to ask. We believe that we, because of our struggle, have the right to ask the world our survival. I was a prisoner during Somoza regime, and my husband spent 4 years in prison. I was tortured, and I was burned. My body was burned with cigarette butts. I have the signals, the scars. My 2 boys, they fight it, and now they are. I have one son. He's in the army, and he's a medical doctor, and the other is an economist, and he's in the army too. It was very hard for us women during the Somoza regime, because our kids were killed on the streets just because being young in Nicaragua it was a crime, and that's why youth does not forget, and they are now very active. They're eager to defend the country, because we don't want anything of those things to come back.
We know that when the Sandinistas came to power, they made some changes for women. They tried to change the laws so that children born to single women are not bastards. They're legally recognized, and they also tried to change laws having to do with the use of women's bodies in advertising, trying to combat pornography and things that lead to violence against women. Has that been very successful? I mean, have Nicaraguan men changed some, or you still have a ways to go on that?
Well, it depends. We have laws, and very strict laws, that are observed by everybody. Like you say, women are not allowed to be part of, how do you call it, advertisement? Advertisement, yes. That's right.
Using women's body.
Using women's body for sale Coca-Cola or fires or radios. It's not allowed, and you cannot find a whole woman in that.
What is there anything you would like to say to American women?
Well, I would like to say, especially to the middle class American housewife, please not to believe in all these media messages that they have received, or they receive every day, and that it's not true all what they say about Nicaragua, that we are women like you are, and that it's very important to them to know that they must stop the policy of the administration in Nicaragua, because someday one of the boys are going to get killed in one strange country without knowing what they are going to do, like our boys are being killed by the mercenaries paid by the Reagan administration.
Welcome back. We now have 3 guests who've gone to Nicaragua in a very exciting way, the sort of quick down, work hard, and come back way of brigadistas. 2 of the members on this section of the show went as coffee picking brigade people, and The third went down in a recent reforestation project. I'd like to introduce them to you. First is Mark Schneider, who is, in fact, the mystery man, the first person that told me about what life was really like in Nicaragua. Mark works for Amtrak, and he plays jazz in a local band called Saks Fifth Avenue. Next, Ann Kornblatt, who is a preschool teacher at Tufts Education Daycare. And third, Doug Stewart, who is a carpenter. It's our second carpenter on the show, and he's a carpenter contractor from Newton, Massachusetts. Well, I'd like to welcome you all, and I hope you can tell us a lot that we don't know about what it's like in Nicaragua. Specifically, I'd like to start with you, Mark. Why on earth did you give up your vacation to go down and work for 2 weeks picking coffee?
Well, I had been to Nicaragua once before, shortly after the revolution. Well, a few years after. I got there right just at the time of, a little bit after the PATCO strike. And being a union member and having seen what Reagan was doing to PATCO, I wanted to see some of the other people that he was doing the same kind of thing to. And I spent 2 weeks just kind of walking around and talking to people, and people were very receptive and spoke very openly. And I decided that if I ever had the chance to go back and do something constructive in this country, that I would go back and do it. And so when I found out about the opportunity to go on the coffee brigade, I took it.
And what was it like?
Well, it was much harder than I thought it was going to be. The poverty that we saw was much more intense than I had even seen on my first trip, I think because we were out in the countryside more. And those were really my two major impressions. Of course, it was a wonderful experience talking to and listening really to the experiences of the revolution and what kind of society people felt that they were building, of which you heard many different opinions. A lot of stimuli at that time.
Well, you brought some slides about what it was like to pick coffee. How about if we have a look at the slides now, and then we'll come back and have more discussion about the brigade and what it was like.
Okay. This is our group getting up at dawn, getting ready to go out and pick coffee. I don't know how much can be actually seen in the slide, but the farm that we were on was a state farm. It was extremely primitive. If you think getting to work on the red line or the orange line is rough, this was our commute out to the fields. The terrain's very steep, very jungly, and most of us were pretty wiped out just by the time we got there, which was just about as the sun was first coming up. That's just to look at the closeness of the actual working situation there. Everybody, has like a basket, and you kind of pull the beans off into your basket, and it's very jungly kind of work. This is Doug and an old timer with him who was a veteran of the United Mine Workers. He was a miner for 40 years and still going strong, and here they are bringing their coffee up through the jungle, ready to be weighed in. This was kind of like the end of the day. You can see a big group of Nicaraguan and North American coffee pickers working together. This is where the coffee is being weighed, measured out, and counted. At the end of the day, everybody, that's what a measure of coffee looks like as it's finally in and ready to be thrown into the sack. Coffee's their big crop in Nicaragua. It's the major cash crop, and a lot depends on it. Here you see the coffee being dragged away by hand, getting ready to be carted off into the processing areas. We were lucky enough to be taken to a meeting between farmers, independent landholding farmers, and the president of the country. And in this meeting, you see a farmer getting up and talking about the destruction that was wreaked on his farm by the Contra. One after one, all of the people in the hats that you see got up and told the same story about their land being requisitioned essentially by the Contras. And they asked the president, who you now see speaking right there, to what he could do to alleviate the situation, and the answer was really that they would try to help them out with their loans, but other than that, there was not much they could do. In that last shot, you see a picture of a train. Being a railroad worker, I couldn't help a chance to meet and talk with some other railroaders and find out about what the situation was facing trade unionists. The last shot is of a poster that was made to kind of explain the brigades to other people.
Well, Doug, you were also on that coffee picking brigade. Can you tell us what it was like for you?
Well, it was strenuous in a lot of ways, and after I came back, I gave a lot of thought to why I was so exhausted. Part of the reason for the exhaustion, I think, was the physical. It was a very strenuous activity that we were involved in. Another part of it was just the excitement of being in the country. That it's in a process, an exciting process that everybody is just overtaken by the possibilities of hope for the future, and they talk about it constantly, and that doesn't end. It's all throughout the day. Whenever you're meeting anybody, it's there, and I think that was one of the most tiring things for me, is just to be constantly engaged in the changes and the hope for the future. That it was exciting when you're there, but when I came back, I realized that it had tired me out, the whole process.
So these political discussions that people were having all the time, did people there feel that their discussions would have any effect on the government? Did they feel?
Yeah, I think that was the spirit behind it. The power behind it was that they did have some effect on what was happening in their country, and that's what gave them the energy, the exuberance to talk and to hope for the future.
And Anne, you were just on a reforestation project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I was on a reforestation brigade in Cosiguina, which is the Northwest Peninsula. And we were supposed to be planting trees, but there's a big drought there. So we weeded saplings, which were really in need of water. And we would get up early in the morning at about 4:15, and we would go out to the fields, and we'd work with the Nicaraguans, but they used machetes, and we used shovels and dug around the trees. And the trees are being planted for a variety of reasons. It's an integrated agriculture. And they're planting trees to act as a windbreak and to act as a means for getting furniture, firewood, for building houses. And sometimes they plant trees in between rows of crops. They have these interesting agricultural systems as a way to fertilize soil and as a way to produce more firewood. So that's...
Why did you go to Nicaragua?
I went because I really wanted to support the country, and I find that my manual labor is my best means of support. And I thought that by being there I would learn a lot, and I did.
What did you learn that stands out most in your head?
That I was really interested by the way the Nicaraguans distinguished the American people from the American government, the North American people from the North American government. And they did this all the time, I think, in an effort to make themselves feel the support that they were getting from the North American people, and as a way to convince the North Americans to talk to the rest of the people and to convince everyone that the government is not acting in the North Americans' best interests. I found it very generous that they could do that they could separate us, since clearly for them one of the biggest enemies is the United States for giving aid. But they were incredibly hospitable to us. I mean, very, very kind and hospitable.
I think that was one of the striking things for me, was the ability of the people to embrace you as a North American and to say at the same time, I hate what your country is doing. It was one of the several things that I had to try to straighten out when I came back, because I feel that people in this country don't have that kind of ability. The Nicaraguans seem to be able to do that readily.
You were talking to me on the phone before this show about historical bonds that you felt had been between Nicaragua and the United States that many North Americans aren't aware of.
Yeah, when I came back, I had the opportunity to speak before a high school history class about my experience of being in Nicaragua. And I went through my talk about my experiences, and the person who was leading the class was after I had completed my say, addressed the class and said to them, "What do you feel about the assignment that I've given you for last night and what Doug has said here?" The assignment had been to explore the roots of anti-Americanism in Nicaragua. And from what my personal, hadn't edited that way, but the things that I had said about Nicaragua hadn't really brought out any of those feelings of animosity. And they, in this history class, hadn't even given any consideration to the fact that there are some good feelings between the countries. And as I thought about that, some of the things that I think contributed that to is the economic exchange that's gone on through the years between the United States and the Nicaraguan people, but also things like baseball, which is very important to the people of Nicaragua.
Yeah.
And the Nicaraguans in Central America are regarded as the best baseball players. And they follow with great interest any of them that do make the major leagues in the United States. They admire what we have done in certain things in our lives, and baseball is one of them. And the material advantages that we've had have accrued in our country, I think they look to those things, and they realize that they live in a world that we all live in now, where the economic interchange is necessary, and they would welcome exchange with our country.
And when you were in Nicaragua, you were living on an upe. Can you tell us what an upe is and what your experience was there?
An upe is a state-run farm. And one of the big things that the Sandinista government did when they took power after the triumph of the revolution was that they divided the land up. And one of their major goals is to give the land back to the campesinos, to the peasants. And an upe is the land is owned by the government, and it's worked by the peasants, but they receive a salary for their work, much more than they used to under Somoza. They have schooling on the farm, and they have adult education classes, and they get food and supplies at a reduced rate so that they can make it, because their salary is low, but they can still afford to buy things. And then the upe has land all over. There's a bunch of fields, and there are several upes that are placed together. And then some of the upe land might be given out to like the Ministry of Environmental Stuff, which is the ministry that I worked for. And then most of the land is used for the important crops. And then also nearby there were cooperatives, which is really the goal of the Sandinista government, is to get the people involved in cooperatives because they want them to have their own land. The upes are owned, the upes constitute a small portion actually of all the land in Nicaragua. The largest amount of productive land is owned by large private farmers.
Well, that kind of goes against the current myth that the Sandinistas have taken over all the land and are forcing people to work on certain farms. I mean, I think everyone understands that Nicaragua is an agricultural country, but what I think I'd like you to reply to is, are the people who are working on these coffee farms and on the upes doing it out of choice? Are they being made to work there, and how do they regard the situation?
Well, there's just stated, there's a lot of different kinds of land holdings, and there's a big debate in Nicaragua today about where the direction of the economy is going to go and how things will be in the future. It is true that the large number, there's a big farm owners association called the UNAG, which is very, very interesting. They made an offer to North American farmers who are having their land, foreclosed by banks here. They made an offer to North American farmers saying, any of you who have some experience and want to open up a farm down here in Nicaragua, you're welcome, we'll give you the land.
Yeah, maybe some farmers watching this show
there
will
are
go.
some who have actually taken, believe who have actually taken that up. So it's just one of the curious things about
Well, actually, I don't know if you, Mark, went on that group of us, part of the group that went to the rice farm.
Yes.
Right. We did have some opportunity to see different methods and different ownership of land. And one of the things that we were taken to was a rice farm that was about, I think, something like 5,000 acres, where they plant rice, privately owned plant rice with airplanes and harvest. For somebody from the city like myself, it was a pretty incredible process. Some of the people in our group were quite upset that the Sandinistas would condone somebody of this wealth and undertaking business in the country. And taken aside, I think it was Jaime Wheelock would expressed his feeling that the country needed large rice producers like this fellow's. And his expertise in producing rice could not be duplicated by masses of people going out in hand planting and harvesting rice. These people are very sophisticated agronomists and use the latest technology. It's a very wealthy agricultural country, and it does have these privately owned farms that are huge and very successful.
Well, also something they're very proud of is the fact that they have a mixed economy. I mean, it's really important to them that they have this mixed economy, and that they have the large farmers, and they have the small private farmers, and they have the campesinos who are still working on the upes. And their main thing is that the large private farmers can continue to be large private farmers as long as they continue to produce for the country. There's a problem if they stop.
So your sense is that the intention is to maintain a mixed economy into the future?
That's what the Nicaraguan government says, yes. Just to add a few things to this. The only land that's actually been confiscated has been the land that Somoza himself owned. He owned a tremendous amount of that country himself personally. That's the only land that was confiscated, and then the land of people that have decided to leave and now live in Miami, and we're just going to leave their lands lie fallow. There was no individual small farmer in Nicaragua who had their land taken over by the state. That didn't happen. That's not the long-term goal of the Nicaraguan Revolution by any means, to have some kind of forced collectivization of the land. Also, just to pick up on a point that both other speakers said, there's an unevenness in the economy in terms of the technological level now. We all saw the real low, we worked at the real low end of the spectrum where, we had a horse come in and bring us our rice and beans. That's the way that we ate. But as Doug mentioned, at the end of our trip, we got to see the most modern developments that are going on in Nicaragua. We saw a plant that was donated by the Cubans to the Nicaraguans, in which there was the most modern plant in the world. What it did was it transformed sugarcane into alcohol, but the runoff, the real product of it was electricity. And to us city folks, I mean, the whole thing was it was incredible to see with all the laser beams and the whole electronic level of things. So there is a development in the country that's on a pretty high technological level. Nicaraguans are getting help from all sectors of the world, from the Eastern Bloc, from the Western European countries, from other Latin American countries. So it's a real internationalized process that's going on there, and it's a real international learning experience, I think, for people in many, many countries.
And so there are brigadistas from other countries there as well.
Definitely.
Doug, I would like to ask you a personal question just before we close and go to our next tape. And that is, you mentioned to me that you were a Vietnam veteran. And I would just like to ask you, as a person who is a Vietnam veteran, what is your opinion of military aid to the Contras?
Well, I have to say a little bit. I'm a Vietnam veteran. I'm not of the stripe of Charles Litke, who you may be familiar with, who was the chaplain, Army chaplain, who recently has given up his Medal of Honor and is now on a hunger fast in Washington over this issue. His hunger fast is going to continue until the United States, something happens in the United States to alter our acceptance or rejection of the World Court's decision. Charles Litke is a real war hero. I went to Vietnam screaming and kicking. I was not in favor of the war in Vietnam. And so my position hasn't really changed. What's really changed in this situation is that I refused to go to Vietnam, and I was taken. I was handcuffed and taken, and I wasn't given the right to due process, I suppose. And the reason I've gotten involved in the situation in Nicaragua now is that I feel that people ought to get involved sooner, earlier on in the process, as I see it, when things can make a difference. I didn't feel like I was really able to make a difference in that situation because I wasn't organized enough at the right time, and that now if people get together, that maybe something can come out of that. So I mean, I obviously am opposed to aid to the Contras, and I feel that one of the things that people can do right now is to support Charles Litke and the 3 other Vietnam veterans who are now on a hunger fast in Washington. And in the local area, you can do that by this Sunday. There's going to be a vigil. There is a continuing vigil by the Smedley D. Butler Brigade. It's a group of Vietnam veterans who have organized this vigil on the Boston Common to support Charles Litke. But they are so, and we're constantly pulling guard duty over the 1-month period of September. But that's culminating in a vigil on September 28th at the Boston Common. If people could show up for that and participate in that, hopefully it will be some sign to Litke that his hunger fast is having an effect on the people, and we are organizing.
Well, thank you very much for all that you've said. We're going to go now to a tape that was made at a sewing collective in Nicaragua by a woman you'll meet shortly who just got back